Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is McGlynn. First up tonight, our Ukraine update on day 532 of the Russian invasion. Russian officials claim to have shot down 2 Ukrainian combat drones headed for Moscow. The mayor of Moscow, Sergei Sobyanin, said that emergency services were at the scene. Ukraine has claimed it is enjoying partial success on the southern front while successfully defending against a Russian push in the east, where the situation is described as complex but controlled. Deputy Defence Minister Hanna Maliar said that Ukrainian offensive actions continue in the Bakhmut direction, where Russian forces make constant assaults to try and restore lost positions. She stated that Russian attempts to push forward near Kupiansk were being repelled. 499 children have been killed and more than 1,594 injured in Ukraine during the course of the war so far, according to the latest figures released by the Office of the Prosecutor General of Ukraine. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine claimed to have downed a Russian helicopter today. Local authorities in Dnipropetrovsk region report that overnight an 18-year-old boy was killed and 3 men were wounded in a Russian strike in the area of Nikopol. A church and private houses were damaged. Russian security forces are reported to have detained a man accused of sabotaging a gas pipeline in Crimea at the behest of the Ukrainian secret services. Poland plans to send 2,000 troops to the Belarus border to support the border guard. 49 second-hand Leopard 1 tanks that once belonged to Belgium have been bought by a major European country for the Ukrainian army fighting Russia, according to an arms trader who arranged the deal. Ukrainian officials have accused the Kremlin's forces of targeting rescue workers by hitting residential buildings in Pokrovsk with 2 consecutive missile strikes. The first one to draw crews to the scene and the second one to wound or kill them. The strikes on Monday evening killed 9 people and wounded more than 80 others. President Zelensky said in a video published on Tuesday that Ukraine would fight back against Russia in the Black Sea to ensure its waters were not blockaded and that it could import and export grain and other goods. The UK has said it is targeting Vladimir Putin's access to foreign military supplies by imposing 25 new sanctions on individuals and businesses. Our top story tonight. The National Institute of Economic and Social Research has reported today that it will likely take until the third quarter of 2024 for UK output to return to its pre-pandemic peak, and that there was a 60% risk of the government going to the polls during a recession. The NIESR said that the UK economy has suffered from 5 years of lost growth and a widening gap between the economically prosperous and the less well-off. In its quarterly update on the state of the economy, the NIESR said that the poorest tenth of the population had been especially hard hit by Britain's cost of living crisis and would need an income boost of around £4,000 a year to have the same living standards as the year before the COVID-19 pandemic. The poorest households have already been hit by slow wage growth, higher debt, the need to devote more of their budgets to energy, food and housing costs, and with few, if any, savings, would be 17% worse off by the end of 2024 than they were 5 years earlier, while the richest households would be 5% worse off. The think tank believes the UK will avoid recession this year, but that the economy will only grow by 0.4%. The impact of the Bank of England's 14 consecutive increases in interest rates to a rate of 5.25% will result in only 0.3% growth in 2024. It stated that there was even a chance that the economy would contract by the end of 2023 and roughly a 60% risk of recession by the end of 2024. NIESR's Deputy Director for Public Policy, Professor Adrian Pabst, said that we are not levelling up, we are doing quite the opposite in terms of real wage growth. He said that falling real wages combined with persistent inflation are hitting the low-income households hardest, leading to lower real disposable incomes by about 17% in 2024 compared with 2019. The NIESR said 1.6 million low-income households with incomes of £15,000 or less were spending an average of £3,200 a year paying back debts at interest rates averaging 76%. A general election must be held by January 2025 at the latest, meaning it is likely to take place during a recession if the NISR's predictions are correct. Commenting, SNP economy spokesperson Stuart Hosey MP said, "Brexit has been a disaster for Scotland. It has cost us billions of pounds, caused long-term damage to economic growth, and hit families in the pocket as the cost of living in the UK soars. Sunak and Starmer are taking the UK on a path to long-term decline, low economic growth, and permanently higher living costs by imposing Brexit against Scotland's will." Further stating that the SNP is the only party offering an escape from Brexit and a route back to EU prosperity with independence. Securing independence and regaining Scotland's place in the EU is key to boosting our economy. Ahead of campaigning in Cambuslang, SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn has warned that Sir Keir Starmer had sold Scotland out by supporting a Tory hard Brexit, taking billions of pounds from Scotland's economy, cutting EU funding in Rutherglen and Hamilton West, and costing families hundreds of pounds by increasing inflation, mortgage rates and food prices. SNP candidate and local councillor Katie Loudon challenged Michael Shanks to explain why the Labour Party supports a hard Tory Brexit, which is making families in Rutherglen and Hamilton West poorer. Given that Michael Shanks had previously quit the Labour Party over the issue, at the time resigning in 2019, Michael Shanks warned the Labour Party had a bankrupt approach to our membership of the EU, and is complacent about the impact it will have on the poorest people across the UK. Since then, the Labour Party's support for Brexit has become a firmer policy. Sir Keir Starmer has admitted that the Labour Party now fully supports Brexit and has ruled out any return to the EU, single market and freedom of movement, declaring that under a UK Labour government, there's no going back into the EU, there's no going back into the single market. Stephen Flynn's campaign visit comes as leading economists, including former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, have warned that Brexit is the reason the UK has higher and more stubborn inflation than the EU, driving up mortgage rates, food prices and the cost of living. He also said that Scotland has lost more than £300 million in European support as a result of a 60% shortfall in the UK government's replacement funding. Stephen Flynn MP said that Brexit is fueling the UK cost of living crisis and making families in Rutherglen and Hamilton West poorer, adding that a vote for the SNP at the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election is a vote to reject Brexit and tackle the cost of living. Katie Loudon is the only candidate that will stand up for Scotland's interests in the face of this Westminster-made cost of living crisis. SNP candidate and local councillor Katie Loudon said Michael Shanks must explain why the Labour Party supports a hard Tory Brexit, which is making families in Rutherglen and Hamilton West poorer and costing Scotland billions of pounds. Around two-thirds, or 63%, of voters in South Lanarkshire previously voted to remain in the EU at the 2016 EU referendum. Following an unprecedented data breach which disclosed details of over 10,000 police officers and staff in Northern Ireland may consider leaving the police force or moving house. Today, political leaders and police representatives wrestled with the security and financial implications of a breach that could potentially expose officers, including those undercover, to terrorist intimidation and attack. Naomi Long, the leader of the Alliance Party, who served as Justice Minister from 2020 to 2022, said that officers are frightened and their friends and family are in jeopardy. She added that it would be impossible to fully eradicate the digital footprints of the data breach given the rank and grade data of all employees at the PSNI, including surnames, initials and what department they work in. Chair of the Police Federation of Northern Ireland, Liam Kelly, said that many officers went to great lengths to shield their identities, in some cases not telling friends and associates that they were police, and that the Federation will consider legal action once the police investigation into what has been categorised as a critical incident concludes. He stated that trust from officers has been broken by the data breach and told RTE that some officers in sensitive roles might end up having to change posts and move home. The PSNI blamed human error for releasing an Excel spreadsheet in response to a Freedom of Information request that was published on a Freedom of Information website called What Do They Know yesterday at 2:30 p.m. The spreadsheet did not give him addresses and was removed 2 hours later after the police discovered the mistake. The Assistant Chief Constable, Chris Todd, has apologised and said that the error was unacceptable. An emergency meeting of the Policing Board of Northern Ireland, which oversees the force, is to be held on Thursday. Those seeking asylum in the UK who refuse accommodation on barges, such as the Bibi Stockholm, may have their government support withdrawn, according to Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick. The first group of asylum seekers were moved onto the barge in Portland, Dorset on Monday, and lawyers quickly intervened to halt further transfers following reports that the 220-bedroom vessel was unsafe and unsuitable for traumatised people. Jenrick spoke to BBC Radio 4 earlier today, stating that if you decline the accommodation that's provided, such as a barge, then we will consider removing your asylum support, and that individual will ultimately have to fend for themselves. The Immigration Minister also said that the UK government was meeting its legal obligations to provide asylum seekers with accommodation and basic needs, and that the hotels and locations on offer were presented on a no-choice basis and not an a la carte menu. The announcement comes as part of Rishi Sunak's Small Boats Week, during which the government is planning a series of announcements responding to mounting pressure to remove asylum seekers from hotels. The cost of hotel accommodation rose to £1.9 billion last year, and the backlog of asylum cases unprocessed by the Home Office is still rising. Use of barges and former military bases to house asylum seekers has been called costly, cruel and inhumane by refugee organisations, and concerns have been voiced over fire safety, overcrowding and the possible danger of threats from far-right groups. Jenrick is also noted to have spoken in defence of Conservative Party Deputy Chair Lee Anderson, who was recently reported to have said that anyone refusing accommodation on the Bibi Stockholm should, and I quote, "fuck off back to France." UK Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick has suggested that the government may be prepared to leave the European Convention on Human Rights if it will help the UK stop asylum seekers from crossing the Channel in small boats. His comments signal an escalation from the UK government's previous stance that leaving the ECHR was not an immediate step it was going to take. So far, it has insisted that it can deliver on Rishi Sunak's pledge to stop the boats within the convention. The UK government's plan to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing of their asylum claims is still facing a Supreme Court battle. An appeal to the European Court of Human Rights stopped the first flight in June last year. The ECHR is separate from the EU and unrelated to Brexit. When pressed directly about the possibility of leaving the ECHR on Times Radio, Jenrick said that, "We will do whatever is required, take whatever action is needed." He also announced the government's deal with Turkey to focus on coordinated action aiming to disrupt and dismantle people smuggling gangs. Commenting on the possibility of the UK government deciding to leave the ECHR, SNP Home Affairs spokesperson Alison Thewlis, MP, said that our membership of the ECHR affords each and every one of us key human rights and basic protections that should never be trampled on or jeopardised, adding that people in Scotland should not have their human rights ripped up or threatened because of the deplorable actions of the Conservatives and their obsession with deporting and dehumanising desperate refugees and asylum seekers. At least 41 people are feared to have died after a boat sank in rough seas off the Italian island of Lampedusa, in the central Mediterranean, according to media reports. 4 survivors were rescued this morning by a Maltese bulk carrier and eventually moved to an Italian Coast Guard patrol boat. They said that the vessel had set off from Sfax in Tunisia and sank on its way to Italy. The asylum seekers, 3 men and a woman from the Ivory Coast and Guinea, said that their vessel, a metal boat carrying 45 passengers, including 3 children, had begun to take on water as soon as they reached the open sea. Almost all the passengers, who are believed to be from sub-Saharan Africa, ended up in the open ocean for hours, according to the testimonies of the 4 survivors. Neither the Maltese bulk carrier nor the Italian Coast Guard boat came across any of the victims' bodies. The Sea-Watch charity rescue group, whose surveillance planes spotted the people being rescued by the cargo ship, said that they were among the few aboard the sunken boat with a life jacket, and, after the shipwreck, They remained in the water until they found another empty boat. According to the rescuers, the survivors were exhausted and in a state of shock. They are presumed to have spent several days adrift at sea with no food or drinking water. Investigators noticed that their metal boat was without an engine, like many boats recently used by people leaving Tunisia to reach Europe, who were rescued by the Italian Coast Guard. Last week, police in Italy arrested 4 Tunisian men on charges of piracy, accusing them of intercepting boats in the central Mediterranean and stealing their engines, leaving the vessels adrift. Others who attempted to make the crossing have also claimed that Tunisian coast guards removed their vessel's engine, then beat them and abandoned them at sea in order to stop them from leaving. The bodies of a woman and a toddler were recovered by the Italian Coast Guard on Sunday after 2 separate sinkings off of Lampedusa. According to Interior Ministry figures, more than 78,000 people have landed in Italy after crossing by boat from North Africa since the start of the year, the vast majority of whom had set off from Tunisia. Yesterday, Ohio voters rejected a proposal which would have made it more difficult to amend their state constitution in what is being called a major win for democracy advocates in the state. The results mean that the current process for amending the state constitution will remain in place, a procedure which requires a certain number of signatures from at least 44 of the state's 88 counties to be collected in order to send an amendment proposal to the ballot and then a majority vote to pass it. Issue 1, the proposal that was under consideration in Ohio, would have increased the difficulty of both steps signatures from all 88 counties would have been required for a proposal to go to ballot, and a supermajority of 60% needed to pass the amendment. This was the first time since 1926 that Ohio voters cast ballots on a proposed constitutional amendment. Republicans, who control the state legislature, had rushed the measure to the ballot in an effort to make it harder to pass the referendum to protect abortion that is set to take place in autumn. In response to the result, United States President Joe Biden said that democracy won. While Dennis Willer, a spokesperson for One Person, One Vote, the coalition that opposed Issue 1, said, "Today is a huge victory for the people of Ohio. Majority rule still stands in Ohio. The people's power is preserved because people like you showed up and overwhelmingly defeated Issue 1, according to Cleveland.com. Abortion rights group NARAL Pro-Choice America released a statement saying that Ohioans' support for abortion access and reproductive freedom was never in question. From defeating Issue 1 tonight to submitting nearly twice the amount of signatures needed to get a measure protecting abortion access on the ballot in November, Ohio voters have made clear that they will settle for nothing less than reproductive freedom for all, adding that Republicans should be ashamed of their efforts to subvert the will of the voters. While campaigns such as the referendum in Kansas and Supreme Court race in Wisconsin have seen great success in their efforts to protect abortion rights, the battle for the right to an abortion has been turbulent in the US since the overturning of Roe v. Wade by the Supreme Court last year. The Scottish Government has announced a change to COVID-19 testing guidance today. Routine testing in hospitals, care homes and prisons will be substantially reduced following a clinical and scientific advice. Due to the success of the vaccination programme and improved treatments, Public Health Scotland and Antimicrobial Resistance in Healthcare Associated Infections Scotland have recommended a return to pre-pandemic testing. This means that testing will now be based on person-natured clinical decisions rather than carried out as a routine policy for all individuals. Routine testing will continue for patients moving from hospitals to care homes and will be reviewed based on future advice and outbreaks. Tests will also continue to be available for those who are eligible for antiviral treatment. Chief Medical Officer Sir Gregor Smith said that, due to the success of vaccines in protecting people and the availability of improved treatments, now is the right time to revise the advice on routine COVID-19 testing across the health and social care settings and prisons. This will ensure that the testing regime remains effective and proportionate, adding that clinical advice tells us that focusing on at-risk individuals under general infection control procedures will allow our hospitals, social care and prison staff to better protect those in care, and that there is no longer a requirement to apply separate COVID-19 guidance across the board, when so many are now protected from its worst harms. The government's new guidance will come into effect by the 30th of August 2023. In an address at a Glasgow reception hosted by UK Sport and attended by guests including UCI President David Lapertient, Culture Secretary Angus Robertson has said that Scotland can secure long-term health, environmental and tourism benefits from hosting the Cycling World Championships. Robertson said that hosting the UCI Cycling World Championships will not only support Scotland's desire to become one of Europe's top cycling nations, it will also encourage more people out of their cars and onto the growing network of cycle routes to explore our towns, cities and countryside. He added that, from improving physical and mental health to making Scotland a leading destination for cycling tourism and to supporting our net zero targets, the Scottish Government is determined that these championships leave a lasting legacy. That is one of the reasons why we are providing significant funding with almost £36 million committed. I hope that we can deliver long-term benefits by inspiring people in Scotland and further afield to make cycling an activity for life. Further stating that we want to see as many people as possible cycling as part of their everyday journeys and for leisure, with all the benefits that would bring, including at the sporting level. Some £9 million of funding has been allocated through projects inspired by the 2023 UCI Cycling World Championships to support people across the country to cycle. Regardless of age or fitness, I hope these championships inspire the next Chris Hoy, Katie Archibald or Finn Graham. The wreck of Europe's first commercial steamship has been designated as a scheduled monument by Historic Environment Scotland. This follows the recent discovery of the wreck of Henry Bell's Comet in the fast tidal waters of the Doris Moor, west of Crinan, Argyll and Bute. Created by the 19th century entrepreneur from Helensburgh, Henry Bell, the Comet, was a wooden paddle steamer built in Port Glasgow by John Wood and Sons in 1811 to 1812. Designed to carry passengers between Port Glasgow and Helensburgh, the name Comet is a direct reference to the Great Comet of 1811, a celestial event in which a comet passed by the Earth and was visible to the naked eye for 260 days. Comet was operational for 8 years on the Clyde, then the 4th, and from September 1819 on a new Glasgow to Fort William service. The vessel was wrecked off the Craignish Point, west of Crinan, on the 19th of December 1820, and the vessel is believed to have since split in half after running aground due to a navigational error. Comet was carrying no passengers at the time of its loss, and Henry Bell and the crew managed to get safely ashore. A dive survey by Wessex Archaeology in September of 2021 confirmed that the visible remains of the wreck, which survive on the seabed, are likely to be from the front half of the ship. These include the engine assemblage, possible flue and paddle shaft. Further elements of the wreck are likely to survive nearby. Historic marine protected areas are usually the favoured designation for marine heritage sites in Scotland. However, in this instance, it has been decided to designate the wreck as a scheduled monument. This offers protection to this potentially vulnerable wreck as an interim measure until a decision is taken by the Scottish Government on designating the site as a historic MPA. Dara Parsons, Head of Designations at HES, commented on the decision, saying that in September 2020 we were invited to assess the remains of Comet for designation following its discovery by members of the Dalriada Dive Club, Oban. There are very few examples of pre-1820 steamships known in the UK. As such, the remains at the site of the Comet are extremely rare and merit further detailed study. Henry Bell's Comet is of international significance as Europe's first commercial steamship, and occupies an important place in the history of steam-powered navigation. By designating the wreck with scheduled monument status, this means that visitors can dive on the wreck, but must not disturb the wreck or remove artefacts without scheduled monument consent from Historic Environment Scotland, to help protect the remains of this significant vessel. Tony Dalton, who coordinated the search for the wreck site, commented, "Over 3 years of research, exploration and survey by a small group in Argyll established the correct facts behind the wrecking of the Comet and enabled us to pinpoint the site. Together with Glasgow Museums, it was very much a team effort, leading to diving and discovery by John and Joanne Beaton, together with images of the engine 2 centuries after it sank. Designating the wreck with scheduled monument status ensures that its importance is taken into account in future decisions about its management. Well, that's it for this evening. But before I go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated, and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. Right now, we have a pressing need to raise £30,000 to pay our bills and ensure we are able to continue making programmes. We are now just £250 short of £11,000 so far, but we really need to raise the remaining £19,000 as soon as possible. Good night, and thank you for watching.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.